So this is it. Game of Thrones is finished. The last episode is out, and I'm sure everyone has different feelings about it. We went through a lot of different emotions during this last season, and I will address and talk about it shortly in the grand scheme of things. But I think what we all can agree on is that overall, it has been one hell of a ride. No matter what happened, this whole series was amazing and groundbreaking. There is a reason why we all fell in love with this show and why we care so much about its finale, nitpicking every single detail. I, for one, was also not very satisfied with quite a few things that happened this last season. But when I thought about it, it's not only because the writers did a bad job and rushed things too much. I think it has to do with finishing this show after all these years of following it. No matter when you started watching it, was it 7 years ago or 5, or even if you started watching it a year ago when you binge watched all the episodes for 4 days straight and lost your job because of it. We've all been there, haven't we? We all became attached to it and got so invested in this amazing show that captured this essence of fiction with dragons and magic, and at the same time captivated our hearts with aesthetics of realism, where the characters don't suffer from plot armors, and every action has stone-cold consequences of those medieval times that would not forgive anyone without exception. Due to trying to cram everything and finish all the plot lines of every character arc, they have resorted to some choices that were not thematically faithful to the show. And that's why I think a lot of people were unsatisfied. When I sat on it and let my raw emotions settle down, when I looked back at the show, I realized it was not that horrible as I first pictured in my head after just finishing it. If I had recorded what I thought after watching every episode in this last season and listened to it now, I would probably say, mate, you're overreacting a bit. It was not that bad. The weird thing is, I caught myself a few times hating on some parts that were actually good, just because I was still salty about the other big mistakes. So I realized we are so mad about the mistakes they made because we have personal stakes in the show. We follow and grow with the characters. We were heartbroken, we were angry, we waited in excitement. And the thought of it ending like this crushes our high expectations, and we are looking for something to blame. And this makes us overlook a lot of great things about the show. I'm not saying Season 8 was great and it had no flaws. I usually tend to overlook small mistakes in order to enjoy the movie experience. I'm generally a happy guy, and watching movies is a joyful experience for me. So the last thing I want to do is get stuck on mistakes the movie made and stress over it. So actually there were quite a few big mistakes, but when I thought about it, it all came down to too much rushing. It should have been at least 10 episodes. HBO even offered them 10 seasons, but the head honchos of the show, Dan Weiss and David Benioff, decided to rush it because they have a future Star Wars project and want to get this over with as quickly as possible. And I know a lot of people are hating them for it, and I also am inclined to blame all of it on them, but I don't want to blame them. They have their own lives and they have their own decisions. They don't have any obligations to do things as we want them. That being said though, at the end of the day, I think it was a very poor decision for them, because this show is and probably will be their biggest creation in their lives. And half-heartedly finishing it like this really ruins all of your hard work that you actually did a good job at. The world of cinema is cold and unforgiving. We all know that. No matter how great a job you did for 7 seasons, everyone will remember you for the one bad season that you made. So was the next project really worth it? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. So I was thinking about it a lot and came up with a few ways how this season could have been scavenged and the character decisions and developments would have made better sense. I think the execution of this season was at fault here. With maybe one more season or at the very least 2 more episodes, season 8 could have been much, much better. First of all, they needed 1 more episode after episode 3. If they had done that, the biggest arc of the series, the White Walkers arc, would have felt more earned. They could have made a backstory episode about the White Walkers, explaining in more details their origin, their symbolism. Look at the things from their perspective. They were a great analogy for the horrors human beings turn to in face of desperation. In a sense, they were the climate change of the Game of Thrones world. A lot of people didn't care to believe in them and still continued their fights with each other for power, when all of it wouldn't matter when this doom would come upon them. All of humanity would be destroyed. In our world, we are aware of the threat of climate change, yet we are doing nothing major to prevent it. We still fight wars for our own gains and motivated by our greedy impulses to make more profit, we further destroy and harm our nature and planet. If the showmakers had focused more on this aspect, it could have been a great conclusion to the White Walkers narrative and would have been a strong message for the whole world. Since this show has become so popular all over the world, I didn't want to accept what Dany did on episode 5. It felt too sudden, and I put the whole blame on the bad writing, because somewhere deep inside I guess I didn't want to accept this outcome, because I, just like many viewers out there, was rooting for Daenerys. We watched Daenerys' struggles all these years and her convictions. So when this happened, we wanted to find fault elsewhere, maybe. It was supposed to be the same heartbreaking feeling the show usually gives us, and that didn't quite hit well, because there were a lot of holes in the story. So instead, it felt like bad writing. So to fix this, the dragon Rhaegal shouldn't have died in episode 4. Instead, only Missandei is captured and is still kept as a hostage in King's Landing as bargaining chip. On episode 5, when they attack the King's Landing, it should have been more captivated war. We could have seen the Golden Army in action fighting Northern Army and the Unsullied. On the port, Dany and Drogon and Rhaegal attacking the Iron Fleet. 2 dragons taking care of the fleet with those dragon-killing weapons makes more sense. And maybe Rhaegal will take a small hit in the process, but not fatal. After finishing off the fleet, Dany with 2 dragons go and destroy the gate. Our armies get inside and corner the Lannister army. Dany destroys all the scorpion weapons, but one was left damaged, but still functioning. It looks like the war is finally won. Dany waits for the bells to ring. Despaired, all the citizens and soldiers shout, "Ring the bells!" And finally bells ring. Missandei is at the top of one tower, chained. Dany shouts, "It's over, you've lost. Release her and there will be no more bloodshed." Cersei is on the brink. She gives the order to execute Missandei. Dany is furious. She flies to the Red Keep in rage. But at that moment, remember, there is one scorpion that is damaged but still working. 2 soldiers who are operating the weapon are brothers. One is burned to death and the other one was crying over his dead brother. He sees Dany and her 2 dragons flying to the Red Keep, flying very close to him. He picks up the weapon. Dany doesn't notice because she's mad with anger. He shoots Rhaegal at a fatal point. Rhaegal comes crashing down on him. Dany turns around and she screams in anger and sorrow. and snaps, looking at the whole city, and then she decides to burn it all down. This way it would have been much more suspenseful, consistent, and balanced out, and the events make more sense because this is war, and wars have unforeseen casualties all the time. And when you lose everything at the moment of almost reaching it, it's a big enough blow for almost anyone to go mad. Otherwise, it seems like Dany was always a bit cuckoo in the head. So what do you guys think about it? Let me know your thoughts and how would you have changed it? And as always, thank you for watching.